Since assuming office, President Joe Biden has been focused on advancing an ambitious agenda that promises to reshape American society, impacting virtually every facet of American life: the economy, labor, education, healthcare, human rights. Can he succeed? Today, we're talking with New York Times columnist and thought leader Nick Kristof to get his insights. Nick, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Great to be with you, Rena.
So I want to talk to you about Joe Biden. He's had this ambitious plan of helping poverty and transforming that in America.
We're on track to cut child poverty in America in half.
How would you rate Joe Biden's efforts so far?
In terms of ambition, I think it's enormously important and significant what he's doing. And maybe most importantly, the efforts to combat child poverty. I think of child poverty in America as one of the great stains on our country. And he has proposed a realistic chance to cut it in half. Now, will his plan succeed? Will it actually become reality? I think that's a lot less clear. And if he were graded for effort, I'd give him high marks. But that's ultimately not what presidents are judged by. They're judged by accomplishments, and it's really too early to say on that front.
You call it childhood poverty a stain on America. What do you mean for people who haven't been following this issue closely?
97% of Americans agree that there should be equal opportunity at the beginning of life. And that's extraordinary. 97% of Americans probably don't agree that the world is round. I mean, there is this amazing consensus that kids should have opportunity. And yet the one thing that is very clear in the U.S. is that kids don't have equal opportunity. And there are 10 counties in America where life expectancy at birth is shorter than in Bangladesh or Cambodia. And that is not because those kids are making bad decisions. It's not because those infants are showing lack of personal responsibility. It's because we as Americans are making poor decisions about access to healthcare and about education access and so much more. And what it means in human terms is that I'm speaking to you from our family farm in Yamhill, Oregon. A third of the kids on my old school bus are now dead from drugs, alcohol, and suicide. We as taxpayers spent a lot of money incarcerating my friends. We didn't spend money educating them, providing drug treatment, providing job training, and that was tragic for them, but it also holds our state and country back.
I know that you've been a big advocate for the child tax credit and moving that forward. You look at countries in Europe. They have had these tax credits for a very long time. It's not some random policy idea that's just come into consideration. Do you think that implementing this, what kind of an impact could it have on American society and reshaping how we think about families and raising children in this country?
I think you're exactly right, and I'm glad you point to Europe because too often in the U.S. we tend to think, it's too bad about some of these social problems, but they're a result of globalization or of technology. And the fact is, those are real issues, but globalization and technology and industrialization, they affect Germany, they affect Denmark, they affect Canada, and yet those countries haven't seen the kind of levels of child poverty that we've seen here. They haven't seen suicide rates reach a modern peak. They haven't seen life expectancy decline. And so while those issues are real, fundamentally, this is about policy choices that we as Americans make. And one of those alludes to the issue that you raise about childhood policy and whether we provide what Europe tends to call child allowances, what in this country are refundable child tax credits. And so President Biden has proposed some. Estimates are that they would reduce child poverty by about half in America.
That's pretty significant, Nick. Half is incredibly significant.
If we can help millions of children and get them on a better start in life so that then they're better able to succeed in school, better able to get good jobs, to form functional families, to avoid the siren call of drugs, et cetera, then that is fantastic for them and fantastic for the country and has a huge return. The best returns available, highest return investments available in America now are not in hedge funds or private equity. They're in at-risk American kids.
Oh, I love that. So, Nick, you've been at the New York Times for 20 years. During that time, you've been a champion for fighting poverty, inequality, supporting women's rights, health rights. You've won 2 Pulitzers. And now you're exploring a run for governor of Oregon. Tell me why.
It may be because I'm a little bit insane. So it had its roots when my wife and I were writing our last book, which was about the disintegration of the working class in the U.S. And it was told in part through the kids on my old school bus, a third of whom are now dead from deaths of despair. And I had known that many of my classmates had died. What I had not appreciated was the degree to which their kids and their grandkids, how their lives have imploded as well. And it just broke my heart to see. And that led me to look at policies here, what we're doing on education. And one study has Oregon now one behind Mississippi in educational outcomes. One behind Mississippi. I mean, I have been looking to see whether there are things that I could do that would begin to address those problems.
Do you buy into this concept that American exceptionalism is on the decline at this moment?
I don't think I really do. I mean, America has certainly been humbled in Afghanistan. We were humbled in our handling of COVID-19 initially. But we've also shown tremendous strengths, and one sees that in COVID vaccination rates initially, still in the capacity to impose military power around the globe, in our cultural influence, our domination of the news industry around the world, music. And so I think that America still has tremendous strengths. I do think that in the long run, it is undermined, maybe above all, by our failures in education. I think the best metric for how a country will do in 25 years is how educated its people are, and not just those at the top, but maybe the bottom 25%. And by that metric, we are doing very poorly.
When you're examining this Biden White House, I think probably liberals like yourself, so many people were very hopeful. And it's clear Biden's been faced with a great deal of challenges recently. When you look at some of the things he's wanted to do, for instance, immigration reform, comprehensive immigration reform, which is such a complicated, sticky topic, very hard to wrap your hands around, let alone get passed through Congress. Do you think in this moment, Joe Biden and his White House might be able to pull through a win in the next couple of years on this topic?
I think immigration reform is just about impossible unless the filibuster is ended. I think that it will be almost impossible to get bipartisan backing for almost any controversial issue. And so if the filibuster survives, then I don't think it'll be possible to get things like immigration reform through. I do think there's some possibility that the filibuster will be either ended or watered down quite significantly, and that will make an awful lot more possible. But also, the Democrats have just such a tiny threshold. I mean, a heart attack tomorrow in a Democratic senator would completely change the prospects for President Biden's legislative agenda. And, heart attacks happen.
So when you step back and you look at the global issues around the world, what are the top 3?
So I do think that climate change is an existential threat to our planet. And there are not a lot of ways in which we can affect how the world will look in 5,000 years. Carbon emissions are one. So I think that has to generate much more attention. In terms of things that could really go downhill and create a huge crisis, I worry about U.S.-China relations. I don't think a war between the U.S. and China is likely, but is it possible? Absolutely. And that would be as devastating a conflict as one can imagine. It could go nuclear. again, unlikely, but not impossible. And then again, I guess I would just emphasize the need for the U.S. to challenge the complacency on education and how many Americans are falling behind, are not being served by this system, and how many kids in particular are just falling through the cracks in ways that will hold them back. And when so many millions of Americans are not living up to their potential, America cannot live up to its.
Nick Kristof from the New York Times. Nick, so grateful to have you on.
Great to be with you.